Hello, I hope you have seen the part one of the video. Welcome to the part two. I've been very small in that video, so I thought if you want to see me properly, so I just made the screen a little bit bigger. Don't worry, when I go to the slides, I'll make it again to the small one. Okay. Yeah, so the audio might be a little bit here and there. I'll surely take care of it. Maybe the movement or something which just keep the volume very high. Okay, when you keep the volume very high, it is more easy to listen. And in the part one that you have gone through, I feel you would have some doubts regarding the misstatements. You could have a little bit doubts on the reasonable assurance part. Yeah, so all those doubts you might have. Now don't worry, misstatements will be dealt again. Reasonable assurance will be taught again when we do audit report. Okay, so just don't worry about those two things. Rest, I think you would have understood. You would have understood. The homeworks I've given, please do those homeworks. This is part two. Here we are dealing with the SA 210, 230, 220. Those standards we'll be dealing with. Okay. So I hope just take you would have taken a small break after going through part one. Now we'll spend 20-25 minutes maximum. Okay, to complete these topics. So all set, all good. Book, pen, all ready. Yes, you're able to understand what I teach, correct? Now, if you're not able to follow, please understand you need to revise a little bit and come to the session so that you'll be able to attend it in a better manner. That is a problem because it's a revision lecture, so I cannot go much deep. It will take a lot of time. See, now itself we've spent 50 minutes. Now, I don't want to waste much time because it's a revision lecture. Okay, so just try to revise a little bit and come for the next session. Okay, now I'll go to essay 210. So, yeah, so I've become small again. Yeah, yeah. So, now essay 210 is regarding the agreeing the terms of audit engagement. Now, in the previous standard, we had dealt with how the auditors, what is the overall objective of the auditor, the need to maintain professional skepticism, the responsibilities of the management, the ethical requirements of the auditor. All those were there in 200. So, which told the auditor what are his overall objectives and how the audit should be conducted as per standards. It was said in that standard that every auditor needs to conduct his audit as per standards on auditing. Now, this standard says that an auditor, when he does his audit, there is a terms of engagement which needs to be agreed upon by the auditor and the management. Now, see, as chartered accountants, we have a very good knowledge about what exactly is what audit. See, we know what is audit. You know what is audit, right? Once you learn intermediate and CA final, surely you'll know what is audit. You're doing 3 years of articleship, so you know what is audit. But you cannot take the same for an management or an entity. Now, the entity is doing business. They might be knowing that there is an audit to be conducted, but they might not have the perfect knowledge about what exactly audit is. What all is the content of an audit? What all will the auditor do? Now, what are their responsibilities? What is auditor's responsibilities? All these things they will never know unless and until there is consensus ad item. That means two people understand the same thing in the same sense. The agreement will not be proper. The contract will not be proper. So for this purpose, SA 210 is being introduced, which talks about agreeing with the terms of audit engagements. Okay, agreeing with the terms of audit engagements. So the focus of this standard is to decide whether to accept or continue an audit engagement which has been agreed by establishing whether preconditions for an audit are present and confirming that there is a common understanding between the auditor and management and where appropriate those charged with governance. Now, what is this those charged with governance? You see, just in a notebook you write the entity you divide it into three levels. Okay, the first level, okay, divide into three levels. Okay, the first level is those charged with governance, the owners, the directors, the topmost people. Then second level is the management. Third level is the employees. Now, the auditor mostly deals with management. Then, if it doesn't work there, then he goes to those charged with governance. Few things auditor directly communicates to whom? those charged with governance. But most of the communication happens with whom? With the management. Do you understand? So the auditor needs to confirm whether there is a common understanding between the auditor and the management, where appropriate, those shall be governance of the terms of the audit engagement. So auditor needs to make sure there is a good common understanding between the auditor and the auditee, and for that purpose auditee is the client. So for that purpose you need to have a engagement letter that the auditor will send to the client. There is an engagement letter that the auditor will send to the client. Now what will the client do? The client will go through this letter and acknowledge it and agree that here the client has understood the terms of engagement, by which there is an agreement between the auditor and the client. Now that is basically discussed in SA 210. Okay, so for an audit to accept an audit, the auditor needs to make sure whether the preconditions for an audit are present. Now what are the preconditions for an audit? See, the precondition for an audit is one, the management should be willing to use the acceptable financial reporting framework in preparation of what? Financial statements. Now, the management cannot prepare the financial statements according to its wish. As I told you, the financial statements needs to be prepared as per the applicable financial reporting framework. So the management should be using the acceptable financial reporting framework while preparing their financial statements so that the audit can be accepted by the auditor. That is one of the preconditions. And the management, and where appropriate, those charged with governance should agree to the premise on which audit is conducted. Premise on which audit is conducted means, for example, the management should be willing to provide the auditor the informations required during the audit. Management should be willing, and those having governance should be willing to provide the auditor documents. Do you understand what I'm saying? See, there is a basic premise under which the audit is conducted. Okay, that premise needs to be agreed by the management. Okay, so these are the preconditions for an audit. One, the management should be using an acceptable financial reporting framework in preparation of the financial statements. And second, the management or those charged with governance should be agreeing to the basic premise under which the audit needs to be conducted. Now, these preconditions must be present for an auditor to accept an audit engagement. You understand? For these preconditions to be established is where the auditor is trying to give an engagement letter to the management or come to a written agreement with the management, with the client regarding the terms of audit engagement. See, in order to establish whether preconditions of an auditor are present, the auditor shall determine whether the financial reporting framework to be applied in the preparation of financial statements is acceptable, obtain the agreement of the management that it acknowledges and understands its responsibility. We know the management has a lot of responsibilities. You remember in SA 200, preparation of maintenance of books of accounts, preparation of financial statements, all these are responsibilities of management. So management might be unaware that these are their responsibilities. In 200, it is said that it is their responsibilities, but standards are for the auditor. So basically, the management needs to agree and acknowledge that it understands that it is the responsibility of the management to prepare what? Financial statements in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework, to design, implement, and maintain what? Internal control system, to provide the auditor with the access to information, additional information. See, what if this is not there? Hear me, what if this engagement letter is not there? What will happen if these preconditions are not present? It's very simple. What will happen? The auditor will go for doing audit. He will ask for financial statements. You know what the management will say? I thought you will prepare the financial statements. Seriously, there could be some clients who think that the auditor itself will prepare the financial statements. They sometimes what will happen, you'll go there and find financial statements to be prepared in the manner they wish. That is not possible. Financial statements needs to be prepared as per the applicable financial reporting framework. Okay, so in order for these preconditions to be present, it has to be communicated to the management, right? And for this purpose only the standard is being introduced. I hope you're getting the point. If the standard is not there, again, what will happen, you think? The auditor will say, please give me those records. Manager will say, no, you cannot touch those. Auditor will ask few questions to the management. Manager will say, I cannot answer to you. Now, all these kind of issues will come up while the audit is being conducted. So for that purpose, the management needs to agree and acknowledge and understand. See, agree, acknowledge and understand its responsibility. Whose responsibility? Management's responsibility. They have to agree, acknowledge, and understand so that the audit can be properly done. You understand? Now, there are few things. I'm not going to every part of this standard. There are few things that you have to understand. One is the content of the engagement letter. See, the basic content of the engagement letter you would have guessed by now. That is, the engagement letter is basically to make the auditor and the management agree on the terms of engagement. So basically, it is going to conduct what is the engagement that is going to be performed? Audit. So the engagement letter will contain the details of the audit. So what are the details that is requested? That is given the engagement letter. One, the objective and the scope of audit. Then you have the responsibilities of the auditor. You have the responsibilities of the management, the identification of the applicable financial reporting framework for the preparation of financial statements, and the reference to the expected form and content of any reports that is to be issued by the auditor. Any reports, that is whatever reports the auditor is going to issue. So basically the engagement letter contains, this is not an exhaustive list, it's an inclusive list. It basically contains all these things: the auditor's scope, the auditor's objective, the auditor's responsibilities, the management's responsibilities, the identification of applicable financial reporting framework, the audit reports to be issued. See, what is the basic purpose? To make the management understand and agree to the terms of engagement. So the content of the engagement letter is basically the about the audit. I hope you got the point. Yeah. So this terms of engagement will be agreed and recorded in an engagement letter or other suitable form of written agreement. They say either in an engagement letter or other suitable form of written agreement. Okay. Now, so this is what is engagement letter is concerned. Then they're saying. Now the question is, in case of a recurring audit. Now, what do you mean by recurring audit? You tell me. What is a recurring audit? Recurring means what? Recurring means something which is continuous, once which repeats. That is called as recurring, which repeats. Okay, what is a recurring audit? Imagine I'm I'm an auditor of an entity in the of the entity this year. Next year again I'm appointed as auditor. Then the third year again I'm appointed as auditor. So imagine the first year I'm appointed as auditor, means I'm appointed as auditor of an entity. Obviously I have to send an engagement letter. Yes or no? Yes or no? Should I send an engagement letter when I'm appointed as auditor of an entity? Yes, we have. That is what we are learning in the standard. Engagement letter needs to be sent by the auditor to the management so that the management will understand, will acknowledge, will agree to its responsibilities, preconditions. Do you understand? So basically, we have to send an engagement letter. Now the question is, second year again I'm appointed as auditor. Second year again I'm appointed as auditor. Now the question is, should I send an engagement letter again? Second year also, is it necessary that I send an engagement letter? Third year again I'm appointed. Third year also, is it necessary that I send an engagement letter? So in case of recurring audit, should engagement letter be sent every year is the question. What do you think is the answer, right? Yes or no, you're right. Is it necessary? Yes or no? The answer is no. It is not necessary. They say it is not necessary, to send engagement letter every year in case of recurring audits. What they are saying is the auditor shall assess whether circumstances require the terms to be revised, whether there are any circumstances which require the terms of audit to be revised, and whether there is a need to remind the entity of the existing terms, whether the entity needs to be reminded of the existing terms. Maybe there is no changes, but is it the time to remind them of the existing terms? One, if there are any circumstances which require any changes in the terms. Second, when the terms are the same, but you feel the entity needs to be reminded. This is when you send engagement letter in case of which audits? Recurring audits. So basically it is not necessary to send. So auditor may decide not to send a new engagement letter each period. Auditor may decide not to send a new engagement letter or the written agreement each period. Okay. There are some following factors. Some examples I've given. One, if the entity misunderstands the objective and scope of audit, whether there is any revised or special terms of audit engagement, any change in the senior management, significant change in ownership, significant change in nature and size of entity. All these things are some of the reasons or factors by which it makes it appropriate for the auditor to remind the entity of the existing terms. Are you getting my point? So generally, you don't send engagement letter every year in case of recurring audits, but if required, after the assessment, if you feel you need to send, you have to send the engagement letter. Now, this is something which you have to focus. Please listen and please read this carefully. Now, the auditor shall not now acceptance will be the heading first. Acceptance of a change in terms of audit engagement. Now, what happened is you sent an engagement letter, they accepted it. Okay, things were going fine. Then during the course of audit, you know what happened? Suddenly the management is requesting you to have a change in the terms of engagement. Now, whether the auditor needs to accept it or not, are you understanding the situation? You send the engagement letter, the management agreed to it, acknowledged it, and you're doing the audit. Now, during the course of audit, before the audit is completed, the management is requesting you to have a certain change in the terms of engagement. Now, whether you need to accept it or not is the question. What do you think? Write the answer. Just try to write the answer. What do you think? If you are the auditor, if they request you to change the audit engagement after they have accepted the engagement letter, what will you do? Now, let's see what the standard says. You have written what you feel. Now, let's see what the standard says. It says the auditor shall not agree to change in the terms of audit engagement where there is no reasonable justification for doing so. So, auditor will not agree unless if there is no reasonable justification for such change. No, if prior to completing the audit engagement, the auditor is requested to change the audit engagement, which conveys a lower level of assurance, the auditor will see whether there's a reasonable justification for doing so. That means when you accept such change, if your assurance is going to be lowered, if your assurance is going to be lowered because you accept such change in audit engagement, you need to understand whether there's a proper reason for it. Now, if you feel okay, the change needs to be accepted, you may accept. If you feel there's a reasonable justification, you may accept. But in that case, you should be agreeing to the new terms in a new engagement letter or other suitable form of written agreement. So, if you are changing the terms, the engagement letter has to be revised and sent again. But if you're not changing the terms and you're not allowed to continue the audit, even when you are not with the existing engagement letter that the management has earlier acknowledged, you will have to consider withdrawing from the audit engagement and whether there is any obligation to inform those shall be governance owners, etc. So basically what they're saying is, I'll tell you very simple manner, I'll tell you, imagine after the engagement letter is sent, they accepted the engagement letter, you're doing the audit. Now they request you to change the terms. Now you should check whether there is a reasonable justification for changing the terms. If you feel yes, there is a reasonable justification and you would like to have a change in terms, then you may agree to such change, provided you should send a new engagement letter or any other written suitable form of agreement needs to be put forward. If you are not feel, if you're feeling that there is no reasonable justification and you don't want to have a change in the terms, and the management is also not allowing you to continue without changing the terms, which means the existing terms, the management is not allowing you to do the work on the existing terms, then you are supposed to withdraw from the engagement unless it wherever possible under laws and regulations, and determine whether you have to inform the owners, those shall be governance regulators, etc. Do you understand? This is basically covered in this standard called as SA 210, a very quick revision which talks about agreeing the terms of audit engagements. Okay, I hope you have understood this. It is basically focusing on understanding the same thing in the same sense. Now, once this is over, we can go to a very simple topic of audit documentation. Now, you have been listening to my lecture, I think from the past 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 5 to 10 minutes. Have you written down something? Do you have something in your notebook? Yes. Have you written whatever I have told you? Are you noting down? Now, those who have written something, there is a documentation with you. Correct? You've written a few things with you. It acts, it acts as an evidence that you have listened to the class. You've written down something. Those who have not, now there is no evidence that, okay, you say I've viewed the video on YouTube. No, There's no written evidence. There's no working paper with you, which will act as an evidence that you have listened and written what I have said. Imagine I ask you to show what you've written and you don't have anything. There's no evidence. So basically understand documentation, working papers, extremely important. Documentation, working papers, extremely important. So just take a notebook and write AP plus AE plus AC is equal to AD, right? AP plus AE plus AC is equal to AD. Now, what is this AP plus AE plus AC is equal to AD? AP is audit procedures, AE is audit evidence, and AC is audit conclusions, AD is audit documentation. So basically what I'm trying to say is AP is audit procedures, AE is audit evidence, AC is audit conclusions, and we have AD as audit documentation. So basically, an audit documentation is a record which contains the audit procedures performed, the audit evidence that has been obtained, and the conclusions that the auditor has reached. Now, whatever procedures you perform, whatever evidences you collect, whatever conclusions you reach, all these things you keep it as a record. Now, that record is called as your audit documentation, your working papers, or work papers. You may keep it in paper form, electronic form, or any other medium. I hope you have understanding. So, when you do the audit, you keep some working papers with you. You keep some documents with you. You keep some whatever procedures you perform, whatever evidences you collect. In the coming sessions we'll have these evidences, procedures, everything that we learn, but you need to keep a working paper to understand these have been done. Your what is your conclusion, what is your evidence. For that purpose you keep a record. That record is called as audit documentation. Now, the documentation that you have kept, the nature of documentation that you have kept, it actually meets the requirements of acting as an evidence, acting as an evidence. Because if somebody asks the auditor, on what basis did you come to this conclusion? The auditor says that my opinion is an adverse opinion. People will ask, how, on what basis are you saying the opinion is adverse? So auditor will have to prove it. For that he needs evidence. That evidence will be in audit documentation. You understand? So basically documentation will act as an evidence for the basis of the auditor's conclusion. Okay, the basis for the conclusion and whether the auditor has obtained his overall objectives, say 200. Okay, then it is an, and somebody asks the auditor, did you do the audit properly? Was it planned properly? Was it performed properly? Did you follow these standards? How do you prove them? Show them the documentation. So your documentation is basically, the nature of the audit documentation is such that it is going to act as an audit evidence. It is going to act as an audit evidence. Okay, sorry, it is going to act as an evidence that you have conducted the audit as per the standards on auditing. You have planned and performed the audit properly. It is an evidence that the evidence of the auditor's basis for his conclusion. Do you understand? So the nature of audit documentation should meet these requirements. It should meet the requirement of acting as an evidence of your conclusion, of your standard application of your standards, of your planning and performing the audit. That should be the nature of your audit documentation. Now, when you maintain this documentation, there are some purposes which it serves. There's some, yes, it acts as an evidence, but there are some additional purposes which it serves. Now, what are these purposes? One, the engagement team. What is an engagement team? Basically, the team which conducts the audit is called as the engagement team. Okay, the team which conducts the audit is called as the engagement team. So basically so once the engagement team is assigned to do an audit, they will want to know how the audit needs to be conducted. Now you would have sometime had this experience in your office where sometimes your sir will call you and say, hey, come on, you have been assigned this audit, you go there, Trading Computers Limited, you go there and do the audit. Now you'll be like, what will I do? When you ask sir, what will he say? Go to the go inside, take go to the cupboard, open the file. You'll see how it was done in the previous years. So it is basically the audit documentation that the for your office has maintained is assisting you to plan and perform the audit. It is assisting you to plan and perform the audit, assisting the engagement team. Then it is assisting the members of the engagement team responsible for supervision to direct and supervise the audit work. Now, as I said, 220 that we'll be learning. Basically, in 220, the focus is on quality. So, if good quality of work needs to be maintained, it is very important that the engagement team performs the work properly. Now, to check whether the engagement team is doing their work properly, the work has to be directed and supervised properly. For that purpose, you request the engagement team to maintain audit documentation, which will help you to understand whether the work is done properly and quality is maintained. Then, usually there are a lot of problems. No, once the work is over, if some mistake happens, your server will ask who did this work, who did the work. Everybody will start blaming each other. Now, when you have good documentation, it will be easy to understand who is accountable for the work, who has performed the work. So, documentation will enable the engagement team to be accountable for its work. Then it is a record for future audits. It's a record which will have significance for future audits, correct? Then it will help in conducting quality control reviews and inspections, to check whether the quality is maintained, whether the quality is as per the required technical and ethical standards. You need to have, if you tell them to maintain documentation, going through the documentation, you know whether the quality is good or not, the work quality is being maintained or not. So it is enabling the conduct of such quality control reviews. And tomorrow, if some external inspection happens in questioning your work and questioning your the way by which you did audit, you can enable such external inspections by making them going through your audit documentation. So these are the purposes of maintaining audit documentation. Okay, so there are two questions here. One is nature of audit documentation, and second is purpose of audit documentation. One is nature of audit documentation, second is purpose of audit documentation. Are you getting my point? So basically, what you should understand is these two questions are important. See, in today's video, I'm not focusing on how the questions are asked. Today's video, I'm focusing on how the topic is being explained. Okay, so I'll surely explain the questions and everything in the coming, because I want you to learn all this. Then when I go to the questions, you understand your mistakes. Today, I'm not going for any mistakes that you do. Today, I'm just discussing the topic. Okay, from the next session, we'll understand how the mistakes are being made. First, you study. Then the mistakes would come from your side. Then you'll understand why I'm telling you those points. Are you getting my points? Okay. Then there's a question called as form, content, and extent of audit documentation. I think this it's a very simple question. And factors, form, content, and extent of audit documentation means when you perform when you actually prepare audit documentation, it should be performed in such a manner that tomorrow, if an experienced auditor comes and does not have any previous connection with this audit, if he comes and just goes through the audit documentation, he should be able to understand how the audit was conducted. He should be able to understand how the audit was conducted. The results of your audit procedures, the nature timing of your audit procedures, whatever you have done, whatever judgments you have taken, conclusions. Tomorrow, any experienced auditor who does not have any previous connection with the audit, if he comes and goes through the audit documentation, he should be able to understand how the audit was conducted. That should be the form, content, and extent of what audit documentation. The form, content, extent means what should be the form, what all you should include in it, what should be the content, and what should be the extent, how many pages, or what is the volume of documentation you need to maintain. But this question is an examination question in IPCC intermediate. What are the factors affecting the form, content, and extent? What are the factors affecting the form, content, and extent of audit documentation? Now, when I say what are the factors, see, these are the factors. Now, you tell me, if you're doing articleship, you're doing audit of some five different companies. Will the documentation of all these five companies will have the same form, the same content, and the same extent? You tell me. It's a very simple question. Maintaining documentation for every audits, will it have the same form, same contents, and same extent? No, it will change. Why? Because depending upon the size and complexity of the entity, depending upon what procedures you have performed, depending upon the material misstatement, risk of material misstatement, we'll see that later, depending upon the evidence you have obtained, depending upon the nature of exceptions, that is deviations you have identified, this we'll see later, then the conclusions that you are documenting, the methodologies, audit tools and methodologies that you've used. So you can see, depending upon the entity size, nature of procedures, evidence obtained, deviations identified, the documentation of conclusions, the audit methods used, the form, content, and extent of audit documentation would change. So these are the factors. Okay, it's a very important question. I would suggest that you just pause for some 2-3 minutes, learn the points or write points somewhere, and then move forward. That would be my suggestion for you. I see many of you are not liking my suggestion, and everybody is moving ahead with the video. Okay, nobody has paused. Huh? Okay, when I say pause the video, pause the video. When I say write, you write. Okay, I know, I can see you. Understand? So please do it. Huh? Pause the video, learn those points, and come back. Now, who prepares the audit documentation? Auditor. Who maintains the audit documentation? Auditor. The documentation is for who? Auditor. So because it is prepared and maintained by the auditor, the ownership of the documentation is with the auditor. It is prepared and maintained by the auditor, therefore it is the property of the auditor. Basically, it is a property of the auditor. Auditor's property is the audit documentation because it is his. Documentation is his, no? Every AP plus AE plus AC, audit procedures, audit evidence, audit conclusions. That is what you have in audit documentation. So basically, the ownership is of the auditor itself. Do you understand? So auditor property is audit documentation. For how many years the audit documentation needs to be retained? They say not shorter than 7 years from the date of audit report. Not shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report. So basically, the audit documentation, once you finish the audit, from the date of audit report, you should maintain for at least 7 years. At least 7 years retention period is required as far as audit documentation is concerned. Remember, 7 years. I'll be talking about one more years like this later. Okay, then I'll ask you the question. Remember this: 7 years from the date of audit report. 7 years from the date of audit report. Yeah. Then there's something called as audit file. That is basically in the office you'll find your files. No, what is an audit file? See, your documentation that you maintain. These documentations need to be kept inside the file. You cannot leave it here and there. What you do, all these papers, all these documentation, you take a file, open it, punch it, you keep it inside. That file is called as audit file. Or imagine you're doing in an electronic form. You have a lot of different folders. You make it in a single folder, keep it in that folder. It is called as audit file. So that file will contain the documentation of a single engagement. Now, if I'm doing audit of 5 companies, all these 5 companies documentation will be in a single file? No, every company will have a separate file. That separate file is called as audit file. Okay, so audit file divided into two. One is current audit file and permanent audit file. That is in case of a recurring audits. You know what happens when we do the audit of an entity for the first time? We don't know anything about the entity. So we obtain all the details from first. It's a new file that we open, and all the documentation will be there in that file. Imagine we are doing audit in the second year of the same company. So there are a lot of details which we already have, which is there in our file. Okay, now this is a recurring audit. Recurring audit, remember I say 210 recurring audit, audit which repeats. Now what happens is the file that we have already with us, that will be called as the permanent audit file because it already has the details of the entity, the previous year details, etc., which will be there with us. Now this year when we do the audit, we'll have to maintain a file, no? Because we will be collecting evidences, we need documentation for the current year. Now that will be current audit file. Do you understand? So when the recurring audit happens, whatever file we already have with us with the details of the entity will be the permanent audit file. And what file we maintain in the current year when we do the audit is the current audit file. So in case of recurring audit, there will be permanent audit file and current audit file. And once the audit is over, whatever is there in the current audit file will be shifted to the audit file. That is permanent audit file, which will become the audit file. So during the course of audit, you will not be collecting the same data again and again. Imagine I'm doing audit of a company. First year I'm doing. I'll be asking them memorandum of association, articles of association, previous year audit report, everything I'll ask them. Current year evidence, everything I'll collect. I'll submit audit report. Will be there in my audit file. Second year again I'm auditing the company. Will I ask memorandum of association copy again from them? Not required because it is already there in my file. That file which already contains the details of the entity which I have collected previously of the previous years is called as the permanent audit file. And what I collect in the current year is called as current audit file. You get the difference. So this is in case of recurring audits. Audit file is either will divide into two. One is permanent audit file and second is current audit file. Okay. Now this audit file needs to be completed by the date of audit report. If you have some assembling work, assembling work, etc., you can go through, do the assembly work, but not more than 60 days from the after the date of audit report. So it means even if you are, see, by the time of it, the audit report is ready, your audit documentation must be complete. But any assembling work, something like arranging the pages, drawing the margins and all that, you can do it, but not more than 60 days after the date of audit report. So you should finish within the period of 60 days after the date of audit report. Okay, assembling of audit file. So this is basically 230, which deals with the audit documentation, a very simple standard. Okay, for new syllabus students, this is in chapter number 3. Okay, this is in chapter number 3. That is audit documentation is in chapter number 3. And this 210, agreeing with the terms of audit engagement, that is there in chapter number 1 itself. Chapter number 1 itself, you have this. This comes in chapter number 3. Chapter number 3. Okay, fine. The last discussion for the day is basically regarding essay 220. It is on quality control for an audit of financial statements. Now, I'm not going so much detail into this right now because we'll deal with it later, but just a small discussion on this. See, when the no, here the focus is on the audit firm. Here the focus is on the audit firm. Okay, the focus is on the audit firm itself. Now, there are two definitions which you need to focus first. One is engagement partner, second is engagement team. Now, what is an engagement team? The team which conducts the engagement or performs the engagement is called as engagement team. Now, if you're doing audit, the team which conducts the audit is called as the engagement team because the engagement there is the audit. And there is an engagement partner. Now, who is this engagement partner? Now, in the firm, there will be a chartered accountant, a member of ICAI. He will be in full-time practice, and he will be responsible for the performance and the report issued on behalf of the firm. That is the work done by the engagement team. And that person or the partner of the firm who is in full-time practice, the member of ICAI who is responsible for the work of the engagement team is called as the engagement partner. Imagine there are 5 partners in an audit firm, all chartered accountants, full-time practice. There'll be audits of some 10 companies. Now, all the 5 partners are not involved in audit of all the 10 companies. Okay, 5 partners do not sign the audit report. One of them sign it. So there is that one single person, one of the partners who is a full-time member, full-time practice, member of ICAI, who is responsible for the work of the engagement team. So he will be assigned an engagement team who will be performing the audit. Now that partner of the firm is called as the engagement partner. So you have to have these two definitions in mind before we move forward. Okay. So these two definitions are very important, and I would actually suggest that you go through these points a little bit about quality control for audit of financial statements maybe before you go into this revision lecture. Okay, otherwise I don't think you will be able to understand this better because it's a little complicated. Okay, the focus here is to make sure SA 220's focus here is to make sure that an audit of financial statements has good quality. That means there's a good quality control system in every audit firm so that the audit is conducted in a proper manner. See, the objective of the auditor here is to implement quality control procedures at the engagement level, which will provide the auditor with a reasonable assurance that the audit complies with what standards? Professional standards, regulatory and legal requirements. So basically, for the audit to comply with professional standards, regulatory and legal requirements, and the audit report is appropriately issued in the circumstances, there should be a good system of quality control in the audit firm. You understand? There should be a good system. What is a system actually? Now, lots of components coming together. System is basically a lot of components coming together to achieve a common objective. You would have heard a lot of systems in your life. Solar system, digestive system, yeah, so computer systems, a lot of systems, though they'll have a lot of components, which will work together for a common objective. So even an audit firm should develop a system of quality control so that every work that happens in the audit firm has good quality, So what are the elements of that system of quality control which will help the audit firm to maintain good quality is what was dealt in this standard. For that purpose, they are saying you should implement quality control procedures at what level? At the engagement level itself. The engagement team itself should be properly monitored. There should be quality control procedures at that level so that the work is conducted as per the professional standards. Now, these are the elements of system of quality control. One is leadership responsibility, they are saying. That means the engagement partner, you understood the engagement partner who is responsible for the work of the engagement team. They're saying he should take up leadership responsibilities for quality and audits. That means he should act as a leader. He should take the responsibility for the overall quality of the audit. of the audit engagement. So when he's assigned an audit, he should take charge of the responsibility of the overall quality of the work. He should make sure that the work is performed as per professional standards, the quality control policies are being properly implemented, the audit report is issued properly. The engagement team should be able to raise concerns without fear of reprisals. A leader is somewhere where people can come and speak. So the engagement team should be able to address their concerns to the engagement partner. Only then they will be able to do the work properly. So the engagement partner should take the responsibility of the overall quality of the work. That is one of the elements of the system of quality control, that is leadership responsibility. Then they're saying regarding the when you give assign the work to the engagement team, we'll go to a simpler point. It is regarding the acceptance and continuance of client relationship. Now as this is something to do with CA final, there are few more explanation which is not required for you. So I'll do one thing, I'll go to your textbook itself, which talks about this elements of system of quality control. Now it's there in your chapter number 1. See, you can see this. uh, yeah, so you can see this. Elements of system of quality control. The firm system of quality control should include policies and procedures addressing each of the following elements. That means the quality control system of the firm should have these elements. One is leadership responsibility for quality within the firm, ethical requirements. You should have a system of quality control to maintain ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagements, human resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. So basically, they're saying one, the engagement partner should hold a be act as a leader. You know, he should take the responsibility for the overall quality. There should be a proper system to make sure that ethical requirements are being complied, even by the engagement team. What are the ethical requirements? Can you tell me? Don't tell me you forgot. The last part we learned ethical requirements. The 5 ethical requirements. Come on, 1, yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5 was professional behavior, correct? So these 5 ethical requirements needs to be complied even by the engagement team. So making sure they're complying it, build a system in the audit firm so that the ethical requirements are being complied. Then acceptance and continuance of what client relationships. See, it is very important. For good quality you need good clients. So whenever a client, you should always have a good system which helps you in deciding whether to accept or continue a client relationship. It's not a must that you should accept a client's work. It is not a must that you should continue a client's work. So you should have a good system which allows you to decide whether to accept and continue a relationship of the client. Okay, so something like this, if you see in your textbook, they have given you good explanations for this. See, they're saying before you accept and continue an audit engagement, you check the integrity of the principal owners. You check whether the engagement team is competent to perform. Imagine that you have only 2 articles and 1 employee. This is not the company is a huge company, and due to which you know that the people that you have right now are not competent enough to perform the audit. In that case, you do not accept such audits. See, when you know you cannot do it, why do you accept it? That is the question. So for that you need a proper system which makes you identify whether you can accept and continue the relationship. You have to check whether your engagement team will be able to comply with the ethical requirements, and even the previous experience that you have with the clients could be taken into consideration for decision on acceptance and continuance of what client relationship. Okay, so this is another system, one of the elements of system of quality control. Then you have something called as human resource. Human resource means basically you should have a good system by which you will be able to properly recruit, train, give them proper training, give them a proper recruit proper persons. The system needs to be implemented for that purpose. Human resource is another element of system of quality control. Then, to measure and to maintain the engagement performance as per the professional standards, you need a good system of quality control. And last, to monitor that everything is working as per the quality requirements, you need a good system of quality control. So here, there's nothing much that I can do here. You need to just read through this and understand what is being given here. What are they trying to say? The basic point is, okay, the basic point is The audit firm should have a system of quality control. The audit firm should be able to have a good system of quality control, and that system has various elements. Okay, just write in the order I'm telling you. Okay, just write in the order I'm telling you the elements of system of quality control. Point number one, human resource. Point number one, human resource. Then you write point number two, engagement performance. Point number two, engagement performance. Then point number three, acceptance and continuance of client relationship. Acceptance and continuance of client relationship. Yeah. Next point number four, leadership responsibilities. Leadership responsibilities. Then point number five, engagement perform. Sorry, ethical requirements. Ethical require. Sorry. Point number five is monitoring. 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 Really sorry. Really sorry. Point number five is monitoring. And sixth one is ethical requirements. Sixth one is ethical requirements. Now, if you take the first letters, you will get the code word heal me. H for human resource, E for engagement performance, A for acceptance and continuance of client relationship, L for leadership, then M is monitoring, E for ethical requirements. Okay, so these are the elements of system of quality control. Now, why do you have these elements of system of quality control? I know you have still not understood, just understand. See, every audit firm needs to make sure that the work quality is maintained. For that purpose, they need to have a good system of quality control. So, to have a good system of quality control, you need to have certain elements in the system. First element is a leadership, human resource. In our this is human resource. That means you should have a good system of quality control, which will help you. See, human resource is given here, which will help you. See, which will help you in proper recruitment, performance evaluation, capabilities, competence, career development, promotion, compensation. For all these purposes, have a good system, which will help you to make sure that the engagement team is properly evaluated, their capabilities are identified, they are competent, etc. Okay. Then next is what engagement performance. Have a good system of quality control to make sure the engagement performance is moving in the right direction. Then acceptance and continuance of client relationship. Have a good system to make sure that you are accepting the right client and you are able to continue with the client that you need, that you require. Then L is leadership responsibilities. Make sure the engagement partner acts as a leader. Then M is monitoring. You monitor the whole system. Make sure that it is going according to the requirements. Last is ethical requirements. Make sure that the engagement team is complying with the ethical requirements. Okay, so this is what SA 220 is all about. So these are the standards that we have discussed for today. The four standards: SA 200, overall objectives; SA 210, engagement letter; SA 230, documentation; SA 220 on quality control. Okay, so relax, pause wherever you want, learn it properly. I know last standard was a little rush. I'll take it again whenever time permits. Okay, don't worry, but just go through it. You'll understand it better. It's a very simple standard. There's nothing much complicated there. Okay, the concept is clearly explained. The points are clearly there. Okay, as it's a revision lecture, I cannot waste much time. And if we extend it too much, your data, a lot of issues are there. Even for your access will be very difficult. Okay, so that is why I'm just cutting it very short. Okay, so thank you so much. This is Avinash Kulur. The part 2 of your revision lecture for today is over. So I'll meet you a day after. Okay, the day after, that is on 24th. Yes, 24th, and we are meeting with what topic are we meeting on 24th? What topic are we meeting on 24th? We are meeting on 24th with audit evidence related topics. Yes, evidence, external confirmation, and all that. Okay, so just go through those topics, whatever we're going in the next video, next session. Okay, so thank you so much. So it's now up to you. Go through the videos. Okay, I think now I'll sign off for the day. Okay, so stay home, stay safe. Thank you so much.